Well, damn tree fell right down in the middle of the path, so the only way to get down to the creek, which is right there, is about this big dumb steep hill right here. So the only way is that.
So fishing in February this past month has just been really crazy. It's been a ton of ups and downs. The creek's blown out probably 5 or 6 times. It's either been really cold or really warm. There's been no in-betweens at all. We'll get these periods where it's just snow and miserably cold, and then following, 3-4 days later, it's just really warm, 60 degrees, sunny. And when these creeks come down, we try to get out and get on these fish as soon as we can before the weather goes back down and it's cold again. So I called up Corey. We figured we'd head out and see if we could get on these fish. We knew it was going to be a lot of work. We were going to have to walk a lot, but we were willing to take that chance to try and catch a couple crown. So we walk up on this nice section of water, and it's just this, slower moving area right after all this fast water and these 2 smaller waterfalls. So we threw a couple casts up top, and I walked right down to the very end, and there was this tree in the water. And right in front of the tree, there was this nice rock, and you could just tell it was deep. So we went down there, and I must have threw like maybe 3 drifts behind this rock, and this female just absolutely cracked it. So it couldn't have been literally 5 minutes after I caught that first fish. I went and took a little walk down the creek, and as soon as I came back, I looked around the corner, and there was Corey hooked up with another one. Alright, so we got 2 fish out of that hole, and we didn't get anything else except for this one other spot down the creek a little bit. Other than that, it wasn't happening, so we started walking down the creek a little more, and we got to this great big hole. And we fished this hole a few times before. We know there's fish in there. It's deep. It's a great holdover spot. So we went to the back, and we started throwing a few drifts through there because it was moving a little quicker than we'd like, and it didn't take long before we had our first fish on. So after we caught that first fish, we didn't really get anything for a while. So I was starting to get a little skeptical if there was any more in there. So I pulled out my container of single eggs, and I threw a nice little, spritz of chum in the water. And I threw one cast right in that chum line, and immediately that float just dropped. So as I'm fighting this second fish, Corey's down there filming it with his GoPro. I got my camera on it, and everything seemed right. And as soon as we landed this fish, we did I talked a little bit, and we got it back in the water, and we later realized that we never actually got the footage that we wanted to. Corey's camera wasn't on record, it was on time-lapse pictures, I think is what it was called. And so despite the fact that we didn't get any really good video out of that, we still did get some pretty cool pictures, but in the end, it really could have been better. So 2 days later, the weather just took an absolute turn for the worse. It was nothing like it was a few days beforehand. The weather just was absolutely garbage. It was like 13 degrees with wind chill. We were outside wearing face masks. I had enough clothes on for 13 people. Like, the weather was just god awful. So we called up Paul, we had him pick us up, and we all headed back down to the creek, and we were going to give it a shot regardless of the weather conditions, because we knew there was fish in there to be caught.
So the weather was just so bad that day, I didn't even bring anything to fish. I figured I would just bring the camera and only record and try not to touch that water if I didn't have to.
So when you're fishing for winter steel, a lot of times you gotta walk and walk and walk some more and keep walking until you get upon a hole that might hold over some fish in there. Now, a lot of times you might walk past some good sections of water that should have fish in it, but a lot of times they're going to be just dead. So when we finally made it to this hole, we walked around the corner and my heart just dropped. It was completely frozen over. It looked like the iceberg that sunk the Titanic just parked it right over top of this place we wanted to fish at. And it just, right then and there, I was like, we did not just come all this way to not fish at all. So right immediately, I went straight to just chipping away ice.
Now, the ice itself wasn't too thick. It was only like an inch or two, but the problem was like the 2 feet of slush that was built up under it, that whenever you would break it, the ice would just not move. So we spent most of the time just breaking the ice and trying to push it off the slush so it would roll down.
So Paul was sitting on the bank taking his vest off, and I was down at the very end of the drift and chipping away the ice, and Corey was up top doing something, and everything was just, we were all just kind of working, and next thing we know, we just kind of hear this subtle splash, and we both look up, and Corey's just sitting there, and you could just see his head poking up through the ice.
So the whole time he's sitting there calling out for help, I made sure to just zoom in right on his face and get some good footage of that.
Nah, he was fine. He could touch the bottom, apparently. We were making some progress, but, it was just such a pain. Like, we literally went around a corner up top, and we busted up a bigger section of ice to increase the flow coming down to the hole, and maybe it would give us a little bit more, power to push it out. But so by the time we could actually fish, before we actually got a line in the water, it must have been, 3 good hours of the day just gone from just chipping away this ice. And for the amount of work we put in, the amount of noise and commotion we had going on in that hole, I'm really surprised, because not even 5 minutes after we started fishing, Corey just cracked one like right off the bat. Well, 3 hours after we removed as much ice as possible from this part of the creek, just so we could fish this hole, and it finally paid off. We got one out of here. It was worth the effort. And it made absolutely no sense on how he caught this fish. But you know what? After all that work, just finally being able to catch a fish out of that hole, and it all kind of being worth it, I guess it turned out to be alright. So after we were fishing at that hole, we decided to just head back up. It was the weather was starting to get a little bit worse, and starting to get dark too, and we were all starving at that point. So we headed back up. We got around the bend up to this one nice long flat, and Corey was walking along the ice, and the ice broke towards the edge where the hole was at, and a couple fish were in there, and they just came out. And we had walked past that hole several times that day, and we had no idea what they were in there. And so I went right up in there, and I put 2-3 casts right by this one, and sure enough, he took it. Got it. nice little female chromer. Not bad for the middle of winter on a freezing cold 20-degree day.
So, I mean, even though the weather was just complete trash and chipping through that ice just sucked, catching those few fish just made it so the day wasn't a complete waste and made everything turn out a little better.
So even though only 2 fish hit the bank that day, it didn't really matter because we went back a week later and we absolutely crushed them.